Welcome to the JavaScript for Pentesters course at Pentester Academy. Now in this video, we will look at data types in JavaScript. Now if you remember, we'd mentioned that JavaScript is a weakly typed language. And we've already looked at some kind of data types which we can dynamically assign and work with using the var keyword. So let me summarize them and then move on to objects. So as far as numbers are concerned, you can work with whole numbers, decimals in very simple ways, as you can see, where x equals 10 or x equals 10.12. Strings can be defined using single or double quotes. Boolean, of course, can be true or false. And one new data type in here is array, which we can define in either the regular way, in which we have the square brackets and each item inside of it, comma separated, or we can use the new array keyword and then define the elements inside of array. Alternately, we can first define the array with the new keyword and then assign individual elements using the specific location where we want them to be stored. Now let's move on to objects, which are much more interesting and at the very same time have a little bit of additional stuff which one would need to understand. Now if you're coming from an object-oriented programming background, you would know that objects typically have properties which are really value or data, and they have methods which are associated with certain actions. Now for people who are not from an object-oriented background, no fear, we will touch upon some of the basics. Now let's say we wanted to define vulnerabilities in a proper way by grouping together different aspects of it. So as an example, let's say we would want the CV number as well as a plain text description of the vulnerability and a quick way to check if the current page is vulnerable to a certain attack. So we could define a vulnerability object in which the CE number can be a property, the plain text description can be again a property or really data, and then we can define a function inside which would be the method called isVulnerable, which checks if the current page is vulnerable or not. Now it is important to note here that JavaScript is a prototype based language, and unlike other object-oriented languages, does not need you to define classes. Now how can we access object properties and methods? It's very simple. This happens with the dot notation. Now we can access a property with the object name dot the property name, and we can call a method by using object name dot method name followed by any arguments which that method may take. Now let's jump right in to an actual example to make things clearer. So let me create a new HTML file and you can really type along with me. So you can basically have body in there. Close the body tag. You can use any text editor. And then let's have the script tag. Close the script tag. Now let's go ahead and define our object. So let's say we begin and let's say we call our object vulnerable, and this takes in basically two inputs in the constructor, the name, or let's rather call it the description, followed by the CV ID of the vulnerability. Now inside of this, we need to go ahead and ensure that the description and CV ID is stored as a property part of the object. Now, whenever we want to reference the current object, we use the this operator, and then we can define this dot description equals the description which we received as input, and this dot CVE ID equals CVE ID, right? Now, in order to get an instance of the object, we can define var vulnerable1, and then we can basically use the new operator followed by vulnerable. Now, two inputs are required. The first is a description. Let's say XSS in PHP BB, followed by the CV ID. Let's say we call this 1234. Right? And then let's alert both of them. So let's say one dot description. Hopefully all my spellings are correct. Then after that, let's alert dot CVE ID. There we go. Now let's go ahead and open this up. And if you notice, the very first part, which is the description, is what is being alerted, followed by the CV ID which we've put in. Right? Fantastic. Now, this is really the way you can create a very simple object in which there are two properties, description and CV ID. Now let's extend this and create a method inside the object, right, which can operate on this data and do various tasks. Now, one of the ways in which you can define the method is basically by using again this operator and then say alert vulnerability details. And now, as this is a method, we're going to use the function call. Function doesn't take any arguments simply because we are going to alert the data which is part of the object using the description and CVID property. So now we're going to say alert, and we can basically go ahead and say this dot description followed by this dot CVEID. And then we can remove this and just directly call the method for the object alert vulnerability details. Hopefully I do not have any typos in my code. You'll see that in just a second. Go back in here, and if you notice, now we have the vulnerability description, the colon in between, and then the CVID printed together using the alert vulnerability details method of the vulnerable object, right? So this is a simple illustration, and as I said, from a pure pen testing perspective, this is more than sufficient, at least to begin with, for you to try out interesting things with XSS and other stuff. Now in the next video, we will look at another way to define an object method, and then, very important, how to iterate through various properties and methods inside an object. So that's all I had in mind for this video. If you are enjoying your time here at Pentester Academy, then we would really appreciate if you can recommend us to your friends and colleagues in the InfoSec community. Thank you.